Welcome back to our channel. This is Max.
This is Maya.
And if you hear some breathing, it's our daughter Saga, who's off camera.
She's behaving now. She's been a mess this whole
But
setup.
she was crying, so we're trying to figure out how to do this. So you might see jump cuts. She's here, she's there, she's over there. It's go with it. So you probably clicked this video because it's all about multiculturalism and how we plan on raising our daughter. For myself, I am born and raised in Canada, but my mom is Filipino, my dad is African American, and you?
And I am born and raised in Sweden. My mom is Scottish and my dad is Swedish. And yeah, that's...
Saga is all of the above.
Yes. I'm going to start off by just asking you a question. That's how we're going to go into this video today.
Okay.
And you know, considering you when brought up in Toronto, born and bred, and then you've lived, you know, in multiple different cities in the world. And Toronto being one of the most diverse city I've ever seen in my whole life. And I used to live in London, which is also diverse. But Toronto takes the prize of all the places I've ever visited. Yes. So having that in your baggage, having that in your, you know, luggage, coming into countryside Sweden, how does that feel?
Yeah, Toronto is the most diverse. A lot of people are mixed. Like, my generation is already mixed, and so our children are like a quarter, an eighth, and a 16th of everything. It was fine when I was not a mother. It was fine when I wasn't pregnant. When I was, all of a sudden, it became one of the hardest things I've had to go through.
Well, was that a hormonal thing, or was it just that it became more real?
I think, yeah, it was hormonal, but it heightened my sensitivities. Like, I became sensitive to everything, including the culture. And yeah, it's tough, but I don't get caught up in that. Like, for the most part, because I am, like, I've always felt like the black sheep in my family. Like, literally, I am the black girl in the family. So I've always felt like an outsider, and it doesn't make that much of a difference here. The language is the hardest thing.
What do you mean when you say that it doesn't make that much of a difference here?
Like, I'm black in an Asian family, so now I'm black in a Swedish countryside.
Right. So it's familiar to you.
Yeah, it's more or less the same in terms of family, but in terms of like landscape, like that's what I love about metropolitan cities, because I feel like I get to blend in, whereas here, it's actually changing. From the first time I came here 2 years ago to now, like, our neighbors are from
Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yeah. And then our friend Salim, he's half.
He's Bangladeshi.
And Swedish.
Bangladeshi, they say that? From Bangladesh. And then we have Turks up here, neighbors too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's changing.
It's changing. So I would say the hardest part is the language. And then the culture, in terms of, like, Swedes move so opposite of me. Like, they're all about their fikas, which is taking a break in the middle of the day to have some coffee and cookies.
Huge thing.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And they love their semesters, their holidays.
For you who don't know, semesters in Sweden is when you basically take your vacation, and everyone here takes it 4 weeks in the summer. And from what we're used to, you're spreading out your holidays on different scenarios, which makes it really hard to move in the summer too, because then a lot of things are closed, and a lot of labor is, like, limited because of that.
They don't want to work out here, is what I just noticed. Like, let me just sum it up. Swedes don't want to work. They want to chill and enjoy life. So that's been the hardest part. How about you? How do you see our daughter and raising her?
The first thing that comes in my mind, because we speak English together, even though English is not my mother tongue, although I am half, I'm brought up in Swedish, and I had to learn English because no one spoke English to me growing up, so I had to learn the same way as any other Swede would do in school. That was the first thing that we had a conversation about, like, how are we going to, what languages are we going to apply on our daughter? What languages are we going to speak? And I had this idea that if she is indeed brought up in Sweden, and if she's going to nursery here, if she's going to school here, she's exposed to a lot of Swedish family. I would think that it would be the best thing would be to speak English at home with her.
Prata engelska på hem?
Yeah, hemma.
På
Yeah,
hemma.
prata engelska hemma. I think that I would have hoped that maybe my mom would have done when I grew up, that they would have kept the English
Same.
language. You know, I still think that English is, my English is okay, but it could have been even better, even more
You're
fluent.
so tough on yourself. I wish my mom had spoken her dialect at home. So for me, growing up, she practiced her English. So I speak only English, and I wish she spoke. Our dialect is Bisaya, not Tagalog for all the Filipinos out there. It's Bisaya. And now I feel like I'm gonna do the same to her because I want to practice my Swedish. So I would be practicing my Swedish on her. Yeah. Swedes here are so sensitive about their English.
Yeah.
Like every Swedish person speaks English and they're like, no, we don't speak. I'm like, you speak, but you are so shy that your English isn't perfect. And this is the only culture that I've seen people are like embarrassed that their English isn't perfect.
It's true what Maya is saying, that I feel like they have so good English, but they have to be able to control what they're going to say, and if they can't do that, they prefer just to be quiet.
Yeah.
And I can only say that because when I first moved to London and I was speaking English, I probably had the best English out of the foreign speakers in my office when I was working. I wasn't able to relay my message in a perfect way that I would do in my Swedish language, my mother tongue. So I kept quiet instead. I didn't just go there. I didn't use, body language or using a word in Swedish in order to make myself understood. But then I had French and Polish and Italian colleagues who did have a very, very low level of English compared to me, but they made themselves heard by speaking.
They were confident.
They were confident, and they spoke with confidence. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there with probably better English, but I'm so afraid of not coming across as, I don't know, intellectual as I would do in Swedish. I'll just be quiet.
It's a very Swedish thing.
Yeah, so it's a Swedish culture. We have good English because it's in our culture to be very reserved and quiet already. So maybe that sort of translates into a new language. Can I also ask, in a country like Sweden where English is so accessible already, despite whatever we just explained, do you also get a bit comfortable in that? Do you think if you were in Germany or France,
oh my God,
would you?
I'd be so screwed.
Yeah, you would have had to.
I would have to speak. Yeah.
The fact that when she calls Försäkringskassan, Skatteverket, all these things.
Even what he's saying, when you tell me to call these things, I'm like, those sounds. Like, say it again.
Försäkringskassan.
And then
Skatteverket.
Okay, so like even when you say Maya, did you do this? My brain's like.
Yeah.
What did you say?
But it's beautiful that when you call them, the first thing they ask is like,
for assistance in English, press 8.
When I lived in Germany, that was not the case. When I called, I had to like.
That has also been a thing I noticed here in Sweden.
Yeah.
They're changing to be more English. She's out. Yes.
You were mentioning that you felt like a black sheep in a Filipino family. Now you have a child who's mixed, brought up in Europe, Northern Hemisphere, Scandinavian Sweden, which is predominantly white.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you? Do you feel like can you already feel empathy for her growing up, about identity, how she would see herself? Like, how do you feel about that? Have you even reflected upon that?
I haven't really reflected upon it because right now she's super bright. So, but to me she is. I don't know how, like, because all things are relative, right? Like in my family, because I was black, I identify as having a black experience. But then depending on where in the world I go, they're like, oh no, you're not black, you're this.
Having someone else telling you what
Yeah. So I personally identify as a black woman who culturally is raised Asian. For Saga, I mean, I look at her and I'm like, girl, you mixed as of right now. But she might not view that here on the countryside. She might be perceived as, I don't know what the world is going to label her as.
Right.
But I think what I want to instill in her, like what my mom did was I would really appreciate, which was she didn't put that as a focus. She didn't put race or beauty as a focus. She put work and character as the focus. So it was the world who treated me differently, but at home I was just my mom's daughter. And so I hope that we have the same experience with her, and obviously I'll have the conversations with her. But I hope, if anything, her experience of culture and race is more of a lived experience by like us traveling, and possibly us living in different places. But like, I don't want to intellectualize it personally. Like, kudos to those that do that, but like for her, I would love to have her experience. And like see where she identifies in the world, but I don't want to put anything on her.
I will agree with you in terms of like, because me, I haven't had that experience at all. This is something that is being
new
thrown at me for the previous 4 years, and I could have been ignorant towards that, but it's also being brought up more now to our attention. Social media and all this is talking about it all the time, race and stuff, which when I grew up, that wasn't a thing. We were never aware of that. And then, so I will view myself as a viewer, as an observer, someone who just has to stay present and listen to whatever she goes through. And if I find myself ignorant, or I want to be be open to make mistakes, because we will make mistakes all the time. And when it comes to very sensitive subjects, that we are also having a lot of different cultures, but then social media is kind of having like a common ground. You sometimes think that everyone should follow the same ground, but we don't know each other's past and history. So I just want to be in a humble space where I can see my daughter grow up in this world, and whatever she identifies herself as, or whatever she feels like, whatever she feels uncomfortable or unsure or uncertain, I want to just be sort of a pillar for her to lean on, and also be a good listener as a father, I think, who haven't had that experience. So I can only enter that question, that subject, on as a observer, as opposed to
I would love for her to be defined by her character, just like her work ethic, her view on life, her belief system. Those are the things that I value. But then also, to your point, I'm going to go back on the whole white thing. Even for me, white is a very North American term, because in America and Canada, white is like a hodgepodge of Swedish, Irish, all these European groups, ethnic groups mixed into one. So in Canada, US, it's very much white-black. But if you go to countries in Africa or countries in Europe, it's specific to the countries. So here in Sweden, typically, like, you can be culturally Swedish, which is blonde, blue eyes. It varies, but culturally or ethnically you can be an ethnic Swede. Now you can be her and be a mix Swede, which is newer. That's a new phenomenon.
Sweden is changing a lot.
It's changing. It's so diverse now.
If you go to the big cities, Gothenburg, Malmö, Stockholm, it's changing.
It's like Toronto. It's like a mini Toronto.
You can see it in the grocery stores. You can see it in certain shops, and like the fact that we can get plantain. It's like, I was so happy.
Mangoes,
like big mangoes. Like that wasn't the case when I lived here 7-8 years ago.
Right, but for me it's interesting because I've never lived in a country where ethnically you are Swedish, aka white. The world would call you white, but here you're Swedish. And now I wonder, what does it mean for the Swedish person who is culturally, ethnically Swedish, and they see all these immigrants. The US, Canada can't claim that title. You can't be out here saying, I'm native Canadian or American, because you have to be native Indian. Like native Indian or First Nations.
But we have natives here too. We have Samis.
But in Canada, like that is versus like white. White isn't native to Canada. What I'm saying is, like, what is native to that land or that country, whereas it is here. So I think, I'm curious what like a Swedish ethnic citizen thinks of all this immigration. Like if it's triggering or.
I'm sure there are. I mean, there's a lot of fear also for change. That's something that we noticed. We have politicians who express a threat towards immigration and so forth. But I also realized that Europe look up to the US. So whatever trend is shifting in
The world,
in the
a lot
world,
of-
like
yeah.
I mean, it's the biggest influence in the whole world. I think the US. So
Yeah.
whatever when they refer to white and black, I can
Right.
already see that translates here too,
Yeah.
and it makes obviously people confused because we're not brought
It's
up
so
with that.
confusing.
But you know, I can already see and hear the conversation of that here, and other places in Europe. So,
Because
you know,
what is defined as white?
that's a good question. Like
Because
I
here in
don't-
Europe, it's like
I think
you're
this-
German and you're Swedish.
Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting subject, and if you have any inputs on that, please share that in the comments below. Like, but I think personally, like, yes, it would be hard for me to refer to a German who would come. I wouldn't refer to him as a white guy.
Yeah,
White
yeah,
guy
no.
came by, or if it was a Norwegian person who would come by, I wouldn't refer to him as white. Whereas I know in the US when you hear that conversation, they would say, "Oh, this white guy came."
But yeah, that's.
But I don't know what that.
I think that's a problem because people are using the U.S. And their system of identity and boxing and like it's very broad. It's very broad paint strokes. Whereas depending on where you go in the world, you can't use black in countries in Africa because it's very specific. There's so many countries in Africa and so many different racial groups as well. So this whole broad like white black works there, and I think people just need to keep in mind when you leave and go to certain countries, be mindful of where you're at.
Would you say that that Canada is different from the US?
Yeah, because it's similar to Sweden because they had so much immigration. So very rarely will you, well, when I was growing up, would you say black? I use black because I'm literally African American. But people growing up were like, yeah, but from where? Jamaica, Trinidad? I'm like, no, I'm African American. They're like, yeah, but where? I'm like, Chicago. They're like, no. Where? I'm like, okay, Mississippi. No.
They want to dig.
I was like, my family has been born and raised in Mississippi for 300 years.
What were they expecting you to say?
They wanted me to say
an
Jamaican, Nigeria,
Mm.
Trinidad. Because in Canada, that is like the new wave. Whereas in the U.S., they have been there for hundreds of years. So you would never have to explain in America, like, yeah, black from where though? You're just black.
I'm not a presenter here. I'm just genuinely curious because I am from Sweden, and seeing my wife Maya come here, how like it's been very stressful for me too.
Oh yeah.
To see you, because I remember for you, because I respect where you come from in terms of like, because you lived in the US and race was a thing for you.
Yeah.
And you obviously had your experiences towards racism and etc. Whatever comes in that baggage. So I remember like one of the first thing that came to my mind when I was looking for a home in the countryside was like, how is Maya going to how does it gonna feel to come to a place where no one looks like her? How can I support her?
And what did you do? How did you?
I decided in the moment that I have to experience it when it comes.
Oh, okay.
Because that's so funny because when you did come here, it was like nothing. Like you were so unbothered with it.
I wasn't bothered here on the countryside, but remember my experience when I first got to Stockholm?
Oh yeah.
I had a freaking nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Because, again, like my world coming from the U.S., I got like mistreated by 2 security guards who happened to be, blue-eyed, white.
Yeah.
And
So it was like a trigger for you.
It was
like,
a trigger for me. So I was like, are they being racist? I can't help but go to that when I'm face to face with someone who is white and they're being rude for whatever reason. Like, it's just like, are they racist or are they just rude?
Yeah.
And I always have to constantly go in my head because I can feel like a victim of racism, and I'm like, or they could just be an asshole to any and everyone. So I would say my experience on the countryside though was way freaking better than the city.
How come?
People here seem so nice, like they want to help, or they're just more warm.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to digest. Those are our experiences. I'm really curious to see how Saga interprets the world, and I hope it has more to do with culture than it does with race, personally.
One way or another, these subjects and concepts will be brought up to our tables. I'm glad we could sit down and have this conversation now. and also having this conversation with you. I would be so grateful if you could share if you've had similar experience, if there's something that you can relate to on the conversation that we're having. Please feel free to share that in the comment section below.
Turn your notifications on and we'll see you next time. This is Snot.
Bye.
Bye.